KEF Connect. Conversations that matter. Tune in every week for interviews with industry trendsetters and community changemakers that will instill inspiration and ignite action. Visit www.kefholdings.com and click KEF Connect to listen.
Hi everyone, welcome to the latest episode of KEF Connect. KEF Connect is a podcast by KEF Holding, and it's all about interviewing trailblazers like yourselves who are kind of shaking things in their industries to get them on the pod and to talk to the audience about what it is that they're experts in, all with the hopes to inspire them. Now the topic for today is citizen journalism, and I have with me three wonderful guests who are here to share their very different expertise. Before I ask them to kindly introduce themselves, for those of you who are just tuning in, my name is Shireen and I create multiple podcasts and I quite enjoy chatting to people on the pod. So with that, I'll start with Seema. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell everyone what is your role within the media world?
Well, I started my career with the advertising industry, and I worked with later on with a radio production company and television production company. And in 2004, I made a deliberate move towards development communication, where I joined a British NGO, where I was looking after the community radio initiative in India, in South Asia, in fact. Later on, I've worked here with the Zaid International Prize for the Environment, where I was hired to revamp and restructure their monthly publication, Society and Environment, as well as my job was to create a kind of network of like-minded organizations across the world for working for the environmental causes. Later on, I moved to Oman and I started contributing weekly features and articles to Oman Observer and Times of Oman. And then I joined the Zubair Group, where I was hired to conceive ideas for new advertising campaigns. And luck got me back to Dubai. And now I'm with the Amity University, and I'm the program leader for the Media Studies Department. That's all about me.
Super, you must be inspiring the next wave of journalists here in Dubai.
Yes, I think the mixed understanding of media I have helps me in counseling and guiding students, not only with the objective to get a job, but also to contribute very mindfully and constructively in the industry that's changing the face of our world. And it's very important that the process of this evolution, in this process, they contribute very mindfully towards the cause.
We'll definitely be talking about whether the conversation of today is pro-power to the people or not. Vince, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself next.
Well, I'm Vince, but basically I started working in advertising agency and on the brand side as well. So I've got both knowledge on working as an agency and as a client. And 6 years back, I worked with a PR agency where they also do publishing, who happens to be, I'm the only Filipino in the company, where they just recently launched the Filipino publication in the UAE back 7 years ago. And I was tasked to head that on the digital aspect of it, and then we produced a couple of products that basically based on the customer behavior. So we developed different products online, offline as well. So now we are the biggest when it comes to outside the Philippine-based Filipino media company, which is the Filipino Times.
Quite a feat. Definitely a big Filipino population here, so you guys are tapping a niche. Yep. Casey, last but not least, I'll ask you to introduce yourself next.
Hello, my name is Casey Fitzgerald. I'm a senior writer and host at Lovin Dubai. My journey with news started with an interest back in university. I studied journalism and Irish, which doesn't really help me now since I moved to the UAE. But I moved as a teacher, and then when Lovin Dubai, which is one of the fastest growing digital media platforms in the UAE started out over 5 years ago, I started as a freelancer. And since I joined, it's been 5 years. I'm watching it grow, and I know we're going to be talking a lot about citizen journalism, but that's really kind of helped us grow, telling the stories of people in the UAE. So that brings us up to here.
That brings me up to actually how I want to kick today off. So for everyone who's tuning in who doesn't know what the difference is between citizen journalism and regular journalism, Casey, what would you say is the difference?
Citizen journalism and regular journalism, the difference is citizen journalism can be anyone. It's how you verify or how you define journalism Is it someone who's trained in the media? Is it someone who has a journalism qualification like I do? Citizen journalism is anyone with a phone. It can be, and internet access, of course.
And a pen and paper, maybe?
Well, maybe not. It's anyone who can access a social media platform, anyone who can access the internet, and anyone with a voice that has a story to tell. Citizen journalism is the new storytelling. Journalism, traditionally to all of us, is broadsheet newspapers, news on the hour, every hour, 6 o'clock, catching up with the news, some of the stories we possibly have heard over a conversation earlier. It's catching up. Citizen journalism is speed, it's power, and it's people sharing stories that they didn't have the power to share until, I guess, the internet came along.
So why are people feeling empowered to share now more than ever?
If you ask me, there's a concept in sociology, social psychology, concept of cognition. So the cognition is where you have urge to express yourself, where you have urge to seek knowledge. And if you look at humans, they started expressing 40,000 years back. We have
through caveman drawings.
We have the cave drawings of Indonesia, where you have paintings which are proved that they are 40,000 years old paintings. So someone was trying to express, someone was trying to communicate. If you look at the entire talking back about citizen journalism, and you'll have to give me a little bit of time. If you look at the family tree of media, it started with these cave paintings where we were expressing, and then we moved on to the structured media, whereby publications started happening, then radio, and then television, and then later on we got into new media in 21st century. But all this while we were trying to seek information, we were trying to give information, and now what has happened is there is a democratization of media, whereby there's no monopoly of media. There are not certain organizations controlling the content, working under agendas, creating certain kinds of perceptions in the world. So media is available, and this transition has happened because of media technologies and telecommunication technologies, as well as the kind of hardwares we have.
And do you think that big tech has enabled this? So for example, Facebook, Instagram, all these
Of course, because see what has happened, that earlier also there are so many people and instances where citizens took charge in their hands and tried communicating to the larger audiences, but in a very, very structured manner. It's the first time, because of the intermediation of your media technologies and internet. These are all intermediated by these internet.
So just to maybe clarify things from my point of view, if I have a private Facebook account and I'm there, posting opinions to my friends and family, am I considered to be a citizen journalist, or would I need to have a public account where my intention is for the wider audience to view my opinions and posts?
I think that's a very common question and debate people have on social media. If your account is private, you're not contributing to the debate. As soon as you share something on an open profile, you are contributing to the story of the internet. Then, of course, you have, after that comes the verification to make sure that whatever you've shared, if it's being shared to a news source, to make sure that's accurate or not. But if you are sharing something publicly, you then are giving your rights. So Instagram, as long as people credit back to your account, then the rights to use it by a platform are there.
But a lot of media companies will have paywalls. So they'll have the headline out there for free, but then for an audience member to access the main body of the article, they may need to pay a subscription. So how is it then that we expect your everyday person who wants to contribute to do so on a public account for free? How can they make a living that way?
I would like to talk about something which is more of more significance here, first of all, we have to understand how the citizen journalism came into existence. Okay, so if we look at certain incidents in the recent history, 2004 bombing and tsunami, and 2005 London bombing. That was
Jebel Ali fire.
Yeah, so that was the,
that was like a week ago, right?
Yeah, so
they're just examples.
That was the time when there were 4,000 text and 20,000 images were sent to BBC within a couple of hours, and that was the first time a very prestigious mainstream media organization accepted contribution from the general public.
So then these people were not necessarily posting on public accounts that they
No,
own, but then they also share content with organizations.
That's how the process started. But later on, when they got platforms like Facebook, and initially we could only share pictures and personal journeys with our friends, with our personal social networks. Later on, the platform also introduced Facebook Live. Then you have Instagram. Initially, there was no IGTV. Then IGTV was introduced. Similarly, on Twitter, the facility to go online live streaming was introduced. Now the difference and then the competition started. Now if you look at the whole transition, first you had conventional media, you have traditional structured media, then there is another media which people are not talking right now, which came before what you call citizen journalism now. That was community media. Because what is community media? Community media is media for the people, by the people, for and of the people.
And how's that different than citizen
That's where
journalism?
I'm coming. I'm going to explain it. Now, what's the difference between traditional media? My colleague, my co-host, like here, has already mentioned about it. That it's that you have to have a training, you have to have certain skills, you have to go by certain journalistic practices, and you need to belong to a news agency or news organization. Now, community media came into existence because there were stories which were not covered by the mainstream media. There were people and communities, especially at the grassroots level, who were not given chance to heard.
What kind of stories do they feel doesn't make it to the public mainstream media?
The media needs market to exist. They need funding, most of the funding comes from advertisers. And once the advertisers start funding the news, they also start controlling the news. In the sense, not in the sense what to say in the news, but who needs to be covered, what kind of stories need to be covered. Because see, there is an interest. If I cannot buy a can of any aerated drink, I'm not their market. I'm not their target audience. So anything related to my life is of no interest to them. So community media came into existence because somebody had to become the voice of the voiceless. Because those people were not heard because
Sounds very underdogish.
Yes. So they were not. Now you asked me a question, what's the difference? The difference between citizen journalism and community radio or community media is that even community media, the people community level grassroots people are trained by the funded organizations. They just don't start disseminating information. In 2006, I joined this British NGO, One World, where I was looking after the grassroots communication team. And my job was to build capacity of these grassroots communities to generate ideas as well as content and the entire process, because we all know you need infrastructure, you need people, workforce to create content. So from where the funding will come. So these kind of projects were supported by funding development organizations.
Vince, I have a question. When it comes to the Filipino community, do you see any of what Seema is saying to exist?
Okay, let me step back a little before I talk about Filipinos being, she's talked about certain communities, certain behavior and whatnot. But I think when it comes to like how people were encouraged to do community journalism and all that, is that if you notice, we are now basically encouraging everyone. We teach our kids to speak up, open their minds, speak up their mind, all this. So I think we gave people the power to share their thoughts. And since we have the platform to do it, they basically channel their thoughts through whatever platform is available. And you'd see that with a lot of millennials, Gen Z, where they're very, very much vocal. They're very much into posting whatever they have in mind, whatever they see, what their thoughts are.
But it's not necessarily journalism.
It's not journalism, but it's basically how they're trained themselves, and eventually they'll start talking about news. They're talking, something that is more of interest to a certain community and whatnot.
Or
now,
something they write is picked up by
yes,
local news, and it becomes
exactly.
curation of a story.
Once it becomes viral, then it becomes news. Right? Now, when it comes to behavior, yes, I totally understand that. And that's how our publication was born. It's basically to talk, cater to a certain community, what kind of news they want, what kind of, basically, their interests. And for our publication, we basically encourage people to become one. But a bit more...
I apologize, go on.
Sure. But a bit more educated in a way. Like, we don't encourage them to post as it is, or we tell them that, post whatever you see everywhere. But we ask them, like, if you want to contribute, if there's any news happening in the community, send it to us. We verify them. So we kind of educate them as well of how a proper journalism works. Like, we fact check, we do everything. And that, of course, we credit them so that they are also incentivized that these news are from them, and that we encourage everyone to be updated as well.
Now, on the point of giving people a platform to have a voice, not everyone has nice things to say all the time. There's a lot of hate messages that are out there in the world. How can that be controlled?
Well, I think you can't control 100% of it, but what you could do is to lead to create the right way on how to communicate or tackle a certain message or a certain issue. So as I think as a publication, we have that duty to set the standard on how to communicate properly, on how things are being discussed. Like, say, for example, there's a certain topic, we ensure that both sides are being discussed.
And you manage all the discussion forums on your publications and whatnot.
Yes.
So let's talk about platforms that are not necessarily publication platforms. Twitter is a very good example where people get up and say whatever they want. So earlier this year, Twitter banned President Trump's accounts because he was saying something or saying things that they just didn't want on their platform anymore. What are your views on, let's say, non-publication platforms taking a stance on non-positive speech, let's say?
You asked a question, you mentioned big tech earlier, and you asked a question about how we would, let's say, moderate hate, but actually as publications, it's not really our job. With the rise of citizen journalism and obviously the massive rise of social media, every platform has rose and also grown with citizen journalism, and then they also now we see Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube now have to ask the questions of regulation and moderation of sites. With Twitter, they decided to pull down Donald Trump's account. With TikTok, I think they have in-house moderators. I think with Facebook, they outsource moderators, which is a whole other thing in terms of they're not actually Facebook staff, but they don't get any of the Facebook staff benefits. And I think actually a lot of the big tech platforms toe the line a lot and potentially too much. Instagram have a thing where they have a moderation panel, so they do it on a case-by-case basis, but they very much take as long as they possibly can to do it, to make a decision. But it's necessary, right? It's come to the point where these presidents or potentially anyone can incite hate. We can see in different countries in the world, if there's someone using social media to incite hate, to incite violence, to potentially incite protests, it's actually up to personally I believe it's up to the platforms to moderate it and be kind of quick on their feet. It's
like the attack on the US Capitol earlier this year.
Yeah, exactly.
It was crazy. I remember when I saw that in the news, I was like, And again, I think the pictures came from people on ground.
Yeah, the pictures came, and it's you have that, and then you also just have misinformation in general, and it's up to, like, there's the recent the disinformation about COVID, and they said it was spread by, I think, 65% of the COVID misinformation was started by 12 people
on Facebook,
on
right?
Facebook.
Yeah.
So this has nothing to do with us as publications. This is people using social media, citizen journalism, and one photo can get spread thousands and millions of times. So, yeah, personally, I believe platforms need to be more on the ball with it. You see, every time you share something about COVID on Instagram, and I think this is the way that people can move forward with it, Instagram kind of pick up on it, and they add a link, so you can literally click the COVID information link, and then you can get the accurate information. So although they can't check every little thing that goes up, they can give the person an accurate source link when there's COVID mentioned, which I think is one way to do it.
You know, on that note, I saw something, I saw a meme someone posted recently that said, Instagram has the power to detect when a COVID-related post is being posted. Why can't they do the same when it comes to hate, gun control, and all these other, negative things that do come up in the news? So it's kind of like, is the onus on them? If not, who owns the onus?
The onus is on them, but I just don't think they're there yet. Whether or not they want to be there is a whole other question. The fact that they're able to, so let's say Instagram, Facebook are the same platform, but actually I think Instagram is doing it better. But whether they want to be there in terms of violence around the world, gun control, they're not moving on that. But whether they should be, yeah, they probably should be.
Interesting. So what else do you guys think would be the disadvantages when it comes to citizen journalism?
Well, I think it's more of bias, because sometimes, as an individual, you're not accountable for anyone, basically. You don't have advertisers, you don't have government or any regulation, basically. You don't follow any rules. So you tend to be more opinionated, and you don't do all the fact checking, so you just post whatever you see, and probably
opinion pieces.
Yeah, and probably add other information that basically just pop in your head,
Got that. Yeah. But are there some instances like Seema, what you mentioned earlier, where you have credible publications and news outlets that actually embrace this type of journalism and encourage people to share content for them to then disseminate on their platforms?
If you ask me my individual opinion on that, I belong to the school of thought that believes that there's nothing called citizen journalism, because I would call it citizen reporting, reports by citizen. Again, citizen journalism, if you look at it, there are two categories. One is user-generated content, and all these platforms, be it Facebook, be it Twitter or YouTube, these all platforms are thriving on user-generated content. Now, what is citizen reporting? Now, there are advantages and disadvantages. Advantages are that there is no single story. There's no danger of single story, where you have all these prejudices, all these perceptions we have about each other's communities, about certain people, about certain nations, is because of the mainstream media. The information we have consumed about the nations and communities is based on what we have consumed through media, right? So now if you look at what they are doing, is they are actually providing with the alternate narrative, whereby you change your perception because the other side of the story is being told. But that's the advantage. That's definitely an advantage, and also you have a platform where you are providing voice to people who were earlier kept away from the mainstream media, not only by way of creating content, but also disseminating content. Now, if you look at the disadvantages of it, I think the list is far more than the advantage of it. Today we are dealing, and I do not know what kind of surveys are already being done, but we are moving towards a very dangerous times in future when it comes to this kind of content creation. See, what has happened, the mobile phone has given us this ability to not only create, generate, but also disseminate content. Now, if you look at, I'm not talking about fake news right now, a lot is being talked about fake news, but I'm talking about misinformation. During the
Sorry,
COVID,
what is the difference between fake news and misinformation?
Okay, the fake news, fake news, according to me, is a deliberate attempt to create a certain kind of perception about different situations, and it is a very, very strategically created content. That's the fake news, because they know it is fake, but they create it deliberately to achieve
malicious
to achieve a preconceived results. Okay. Now, misinformation is that I can we all are so opinionated right now, and we are exposed to so much. We live in a information clutter. We seek information without knowing from where it is coming, and then we also disseminate. It's not we are consuming, we are forwarding it also. That is why when the new component, the new technology was added to WhatsApp, where earlier nobody could tell that who started the message, but now every time you forward the message, you have a mechanism where they are controlling, or where they are trying to find out who created that message, because if it's original message, it will not show forward. If it is forwarded message, it will show forward. So the difference between misinformation and fake news is, misinformation is you just have some information and you forward, you create it and send it to others, and others send it to others, and then it becomes nowadays it's difficult what is misinformation and disinformation. I've just done my research paper on misinformation during the times of pandemic. Now, if you look, the world has not only dealt with the pandemic, world is also dealing with the infodemic during the pandemic. And what is infodemic? When there is so much information about the solutions that it becomes a problem itself. So that's why I'm so much personally, these are my individual personal views and opinion, that there is nothing called net journalism. There is only reporting by people, and because they have, for example, and sometimes it is of some usage if intentions are right, where, like, let's say there is incident, media organizations do not have so much of infrastructure that they cover every nick and corner of the city or a country. So all these people, the content comes very handy there, because there's a fire somewhere, you get the pictures. If there is a bombing, or if there's anything which is not approachable, you get the information. But having said so, there are so many dangers involved here where you create content, because I think these technologies not only gave us these wonderful platforms, but they also rooted this whole demon we are facing today, where you have so much of misinformation. Who is fact checking this?
Well, I think demon and danger is a very, very strong word. Like, of course we need to be careful, of course there needs to be fact checking, of course there needs to be verification, but citizen journalism is a beast that we have to accept. The demise of kind of general traditional media means that other local news sources have been able to grow. It means that we're able to tell stories we've never been able to tell before. It means when something happens, like
the incident in Jebel Ali.
When something happens like the incident in Jebel Ali, we're able to share that information quickly. And that needs to happen, and it will continue to happen. So I think as journalists and people in the media, we need to accept, and then we need to work on solutions to make sure that we as publications are fact-checking and verifying to kind of combat all the perceived cons.
There's a reason I use such strong words, and the thing is that exceptions prove the norm. If you do a little bit of survey, a little bit of reading and all, you will find, if you note down the number of good things these kind of reporting have done, but if you look at the kind of, it has spoiled the social fabric of many countries. It is changing, and in the near future, it's going to change the face of the world. Because I'm very impressed with this proverb which says that till the time lion learns how to write, it's going to be the hunter who is going to glorify the stories. But if you let the lion give all powers to the lion, then lion will create the stories which will make him the king of the kingdom.
I guess with great power comes great responsibility.
Actually, I kind of agree to both of them.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand.
Well, we need more people like you in the world.
But the thing is, like, for us, we value these people who actually post things because it helps us. And as you've said, as a publication, we don't have enough infrastructure, right? So these people kind of fill the gap.
Yes.
But as a publication, it's also became our burden to ensure that whatever we picked up are done properly, are checked properly before we actually publish it. Then the people, us as a publication, become the source whether to check whether these information are actually correct or not.
And effectively,
Exactly. It's up to
Yeah.
the reader to really actually disseminate the news.
Yeah.
so then the reader would put his or her faith in the publication, not necessarily, let's say, individuals posting on
more like
non-publication-related platforms.
like for my personal opinion is that what I always tell people is that be an educated reader. You know, there would always be a lot of posts out there that would be helpful, probably correct, probably not, but you must also do research, check for other references.
100% agree.
Yeah.
Because we say it's going to change the face of media. It already has. That's already happened.
Not only media,
Like,
but the world.
Well, it has changed the face of media and publications, and we talked about like WhatsApp stories being reshared and going viral. Like that's at the onus of the person, and 100% you need to be an educated reader. You need to understand the publications that you're coming. Like we know when you go online, you see a fake news headline. You can figure
No,
that out for yourself.
I beg to differ, because reason being that we are not talking about just publication, because what he's mentioning, there is a mechanism where they are controlling the process of dissemination. So you can't leave it to the readers only, because if you know the kind of things that have happened in India, you know the kind of things that have happened in other parts of the world where lynchings have taken place, where
But that's down to the platforms to regulate it, which I 100% support.
you can't do that, because see, if you give a tiger to ride, people will ride that. And I strongly believe that we have media laws. Now and then we keep hearing that there are new regulations coming in. Why those regulations are coming in? Because they see the danger in this entire process, where you have, see, all these media organizations, all these journalists, you come from a media school, I come from a media school. So we know the kind of training given to us. The media ethics play very important role. Like I'm in the media studies department. We give so much of focus on media ethics, and we talk so much about the power of media, why media is so powerful. Because what do you do with the information? You get the information, what do you do with the information? That is an important question to ask.
Well,
Those information, information will create a perception, and based on that perception, you will have public opinion, and based on public opinion, you lead your life. The societies move on that.
So given that this exists, what would be some practical advice that we can give listeners to make sure that they are as, let's say, educated readers as they can be, in order to make a judgment call as to whether to form a particular opinion when they come across a piece of news?
If you ask me, I really feel that you need to sensitize them, and media literacy campaigns should be carried out in every society.
Whose responsibility would it be to run these campaigns?
To start with, I think it's definitely government should come up with these campaigns whereby they can educate people that what is misinformation, how do they know that what kind of misinformation is floating in the society, why they should not pass forward the message. And then you need to sensitize youngsters in the school. You need to sensitize housewives. You need to sensitize, because if you see the WhatsApp groups created by housewives, the kind of I'm not segregating them, but they have their own ecosystem. So the kind of messages they forward are equally important. And you need to sensitize people. You need to create awareness campaigns. You need to introduce media literacy in every school. It should be a mandatory subject for all students.
I 100% agree. However, I don't think it's new. I think for WhatsApp groups was women, men having conversations over teas, coffees 100 years ago. There was different ways. Like we talk about trying to teach people to be sensitive to news, but let's say broadsheet newspapers that I grew up with had a bias, and you knew growing up which side each broadsheet was on. Were we taught to understand the bias then? No. Should we have been? Yes. But it's the same conversation then as now, that there'll always be bias and subjective media trying to sway your decision, and you as a person need to understand it. Need to try to.
Definitely, but what has happened due to internet-based these platforms, the information is reaching to large number of people in real time. That's the danger. That's the big danger. And the perceptions, though this platform has provided the alternate narrative, but at the same time it has created so much of distrust in the society, so much of fake news, false information. And because of this media technology, we don't need editors and cameramans anymore to create media content.
People have their phone, they have their own content
they
machine.
can just create. And worst is they can edit. There are instances where the crowd was in some other country, but it was kind of shared as a crowd from a different country, and how you interpret a media message is more important. It's not what you are creating. How people are interpreting is more important.
But isn't it fantastic that people are there sharing the videos of what's happening at that moment, and you don't have to get the bias or the subjective from the publication?
You are talking about good instances. You are talking
Not
about
necessarily.
No, but I'll tell you, I come from a country which has seen havoc because of the kind of information floating on media.
But that's been happening.
People
What
are
I'm saying is
lynched.
there's been wars and
People
protests and
have
riots
lost
for years.
People, no. But the overall look at the magnitude, how it has changed. If you see, people are lynched, people are killed because some wrong information is shared with regards to what people are eating, what people are wearing, what it signifies.
But the reality is, you're not going to go live in a hole away from society.
I agree,
so,
100%.
So everyone would need to, like we've been saying, educate themselves on how they should behave when they come across media, whether it comes from a trusted publication or through their WhatsApp groups.
Exactly. Like, how I see it is that I understand that forwarding wrong information, publishing it there, I've seen it. Even in our country, some politician won because of whatever news they're posted over there, and they're biased. And you know that they're biased. And again, you cannot educate everyone, but at least you can try. And it's bigger compared to all of us. It's a big task.
Definitely.
But I think it should be also a conscious effort for everyone to learn how to compare and read news and to assess whether your source of information is someone who's leaning towards something, or just trying to insinuate something, or trying to manipulate you or whatever. So it's a combination of you trying to understand your source of information, you trying to be more hungry of information, then you'll learn to check who are credible, what kind of information, what are the right things to look for. So I think it's a bit more of the publication telling the audience that this is how it is done. Yes, we're not stopping you, and we encourage you to be hungry of information, to share these information, but at the same time, be responsible as well of what you share.
But definitely. And
with your permission, I would like to ask a question to him.
Go for it.
If people were so sensitive and were so aware why we are dealing with fake news and disinformation to the level where the World Health Organization head says that I'm more worried about the infodemic than the pandemic.
It does exist, but I feel like we need to make people aware of the fact that it exists, teach them what to do about it, because the fact of the matter is it's there, it's around us. You're not going to go live in a hole.
Well, I think the media landscape has changed so much in the last 20 years, and we can expect that shift is going to happen again, and we don't even know which way it's going to go. And as the media landscape has changed, and with the growth of social media platforms, when they started, they didn't know that this was going to be a problem. They didn't know what beast they were creating. So yes, change needs to happen, but it should happen in its regulation. Like, look, the US governments are looking at regulating all the platforms, and let's say if it happens there, it will trickle down to other countries as governments regulate social media. That needs to happen, but that shouldn't stop people being able to share and express themselves.
Definitely, I think whatever views I have as a person, whatever I've said, so this kind of reporting is going to exist and thrive. In fact, it's not going to stop. People are going to carry on sharing information, but what we need to do is we need to tell them that what they bring to table when they share information.
So lots of opinions shared today around the topic of citizen journalism. We do not need to come to a conclusion. The point is that we share all these different perspectives on this podcast. Guests, I'd like to thank you all very much for coming and contributing to the conversation. And for all of you tuning in, if you've enjoyed this particular podcast, I also invite you to go listen to all other KEF Connect podcasts that are available on the KEF Holding website. You can also stream them on wherever you like listening to podcasts, like Apple Podcasts and Spotify or any other streaming platform. You can also interact with us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And with that, one more big thank you to you guys for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having us.
My pleasure. See you all next week.